Deep in the mists of time, when the world was young and giants walked the earth, there lived creatures beyond our wildest imagination. Massive dinosaurs ruled the land, their thunderous footsteps shaking the very ground beneath them. Towering ape-like beings swung through prehistoric forests, their intelligence far greater than any modern mind could comprehend. But what if I told you that in this ancient world, a single act of courage from one brave girl would change the course of history forever? What if the bond between human compassion and beast loyalty was forged not in our modern age, but millions of years ago, when survival meant everything and kindness was the rarest treasure of all? This is not just another tale of prehistoric times. This is the story of Maya, a girl whose heart burned brighter than the volcanic fires that lit her world, whose bravery would echo through the ages, and whose unexpected friendship with the most feared creature of her time would become the greatest adventure ever told. Are you ready to journey back to a time when legends were born, when the impossible became possible, and when one girl's determination to do what was right would shake the very foundations of the ancient world? Then step back millions of years, take a deep breath of that wild, untamed air, and prepare yourself for a story that will make you believe in the power of courage, friendship, and the magic that exists when two different worlds collide. The adventure begins now, in a time when every day was a battle for survival, and heroes were made not by the size of their strength, but by the size of their hearts. Maya had always been different from the other children in her tribe. While they spent their days learning to make tools from stones and hide from the great beasts that roamed their world, she found herself drawn to the mysteries that lay beyond the safety of their village. Her dark hair caught the morning light as she stood at the edge of the cliff, looking out over the vast valley that stretched endlessly before her. The elders had warned everyone countless times never to venture into that place. They called it the Valley of Giants, where creatures too dangerous for any human to face made their home. But Maya was 17 now, old enough to make her own choices, and her curiosity had grown stronger than her fear. She had spent weeks preparing for this moment, gathering supplies, and studying the patterns of the great flying reptiles that soared overhead. Her tribe lived in a time when humans were still learning their place in a world dominated by creatures that seemed to have stepped out of nightmares. Every day was a struggle for survival. Every decision could mean the difference between life and death. The morning air was thick with humidity as Maya began her descent into the Forbidden Valley. She moved carefully, using vines and rocky outcroppings to guide her way down the steep cliff face. Her leather pouch contained dried berries, strips of smoked meat, and a sharp stone knife that her father had made for her before his death 2 winters ago. She also carried a length of strong rope woven from plant fibers, though she hoped she would not need it for anything dangerous. As her feet finally touched the valley floor, Maya felt as if she had entered a completely different world. The trees here were taller than any she had ever seen, their trunks so wide that it would take 20 people holding hands to reach around them. Strange flowers bloomed in colors that had no names, and the air hummed with the sounds of insects and birds unlike any that lived near her village. But it was not the beauty of this place that made her heart race with excitement and fear. It was the knowledge that somewhere in this green wilderness lived the creatures her people spoke of only in whispers. Maya had heard the stories since she was old enough to understand words. Tales of massive reptiles with teeth like spears, of flying creatures with wingspans wider than her entire village, and of one beast in particular that stood above all others in both size and mystery. The elders called him Kong, a giant ape-like creature whose intelligence was said to match his incredible strength. Some claimed he was a protector of the valley. Others believed he was its greatest threat. All agreed that meeting him meant certain death. But Maya had a different reason for being here than simple curiosity about the legends. 3 days ago, her younger brother Kale had disappeared while hunting near the valley's edge. The search party had found his tracks leading toward the forbidden land, but fear had stopped them from following. The tribal chief had declared Kale lost forever, but Maya refused to accept that fate. She knew her brother was alive somewhere in this valley, and she would not return home without him. The ground beneath her feet was soft and spongy, covered with layers of fallen leaves that had been accumulating for countless seasons. Each step released the rich scent of earth and decay, mixed with the sweet fragrance of exotic blooms. Maya moved as quietly as she could, remembering her father's lessons about tracking and hunting. She kept her eyes moving constantly, watching for any sign of movement in the dense foliage around her. Hours passed as she pushed deeper into the valley. The sun climbed higher in the sky, sending shafts of golden light through the green canopy overhead. Maya stopped frequently to examine the ground, looking for any trace of human footprints among the countless tracks left by the valley's inhabitants. She saw the massive three-toed prints of creatures she could not identify, long scrape marks that might have been made by giant claws, and here and there the disturbed earth that suggested something very large had passed this way. It was near midday when she heard the first sounds of conflict. From somewhere ahead came a deep, rumbling roar that seemed to shake the very air around her. It was followed by high-pitched screeching and the sound of trees crashing to the ground. Maya's instincts told her to run, to hide, to get as far away from whatever battle was taking place as quickly as possible. But her determination to find Kale pushed her forward. She climbed a tall tree to get a better view of what lay ahead, moving from branch to branch with the agility she had learned as a child. From her elevated position, Maya could see a large clearing in the distance where something extraordinary was happening. The sight that met her eyes was both terrifying and magnificent. In the center of the clearing stood the largest creature she had ever imagined. Kong was even more impressive than the stories had described. He towered above the trees, his massive form covered in dark fur that gleamed in the sunlight. His arms were longer than the tallest trees, and his hands could have easily held a dozen grown men. But it was his face that captured Maya's attention. There was intelligence in those dark eyes, a wisdom that spoke of understanding far beyond what any animal should possess. Kong was not alone in the clearing. Circling him like hunters stalking their prey were three enormous reptiles unlike anything Maya had ever seen. They walked on two powerful legs, their massive heads filled with teeth that gleamed like white daggers. Each creature was nearly as tall as Kong himself, and they moved with a deadly grace that made Maya's blood run cold. These were the apex predators of the ancient world, beasts that feared nothing and showed no mercy to anything they considered prey. But as Maya watched the confrontation unfold, she realized something was wrong. Kong was not fighting back with the fury she would have expected from a creature of his size and power. Instead, he seemed to be protecting something, keeping his massive body between the attacking reptiles and whatever lay behind him. He roared in defiance and swung his enormous fists, but his movements were slower than they should have been, as if he was injured or weakened in some way. The attacking creatures pressed their advantage, snapping their terrible jaws and slashing with claws that could tear through stone. One of them managed to rake its talons across Kong's shoulder, drawing dark lines of blood that stained his fur. The great ape stumbled backward, nearly falling, and Maya saw what he had been protecting so desperately. Huddled against the base of a massive tree was a small dinosaur, no bigger than a dog from Maya's village. It was clearly just a baby, its soft skin a pale green color marked with darker spots. The little creature was making pitiful crying sounds, calling out for its mother, who was nowhere to be seen. It was obvious that Kong had found the orphaned baby and taken it under his protection, but now his kindness was about to cost him his life. The three predators sensed Kong's weakness and moved in for the kill. Their leader, the largest of the three, opened its massive jaws and lunged forward, aiming for Kong's throat. Maya knew that within moments, both the giant ape and the helpless baby dinosaur would be dead, torn apart by creatures that knew only hunger and violence. Without thinking about the danger to herself, Maya acted on pure instinct. She grabbed a thick vine and swung down from her hiding place, letting out a wild cry that echoed through the clearing. The attacking reptiles turned in surprise as this small figure dropped from the sky, their tiny brains struggling to understand what was happening. Maya landed hard on the ground but rolled to her feet, her stone knife already in her hand. She knew she could not fight these monsters with strength. She was not even the size of one of their teeth. But she had something they did not have. She had intelligence, courage, and the element of surprise. As the nearest predator turned toward her, lowering its massive head to snap her up like a morsel of food, Maya dove between its legs and slashed upward with her knife, cutting deep into the sensitive skin of its belly. The creature roared in pain and confusion, spinning around to try to catch this annoying pest that had dared to hurt it. But Maya was already moving, rolling, and dodging as massive feet crashed down around her. She had bought Kong a few precious moments, and the great ape used them well. With a roar that shook the entire valley, he charged forward and grabbed the wounded predator in his mighty hands. The battle that followed was like nothing Maya had ever witnessed. Kong's strength was beyond human comprehension, and his rage at seeing the baby dinosaur threatened gave him power that seemed to come from the earth itself. He lifted the attacking reptile high above his head and hurled it into its companions, sending all three creatures tumbling in a tangle of claws and teeth. But the fight was far from over. The predators regrouped quickly, their primitive minds focused only on the kill. They had tasted Kong's blood and would not give up easily. Maya found herself trapped in the middle of a battle between titans, dodging massive bodies and snapping jaws as the combat raged around her. She managed to reach the baby dinosaur, scooping the frightened creature into her arms and holding it close to her chest. The little dinosaur looked up at her with large, innocent eyes that reminded Maya of her brother when he was small. In that moment, she understood why Kong had risked everything to protect this helpless baby. Some bonds went beyond species, beyond the simple law of survival that ruled their world. This was about compassion, about protecting those who could not protect themselves. Kong was winning the battle, but the cost was terrible. His body was covered in wounds, and he was moving more slowly with each passing moment. Maya realized that even if he defeated these three predators, there might be others. The smell of blood would draw more hunters, and Kong was in no condition to face them. The baby dinosaur needed to get back to its own kind, and Kong needed medical attention that only Maya's knowledge of healing herbs could provide. As the last of the attacking reptiles fled into the jungle, nursing its wounds and accepting defeat, Maya stepped forward into the center of the clearing. Kong turned to look at her, his massive chest heaving with exhaustion. For a long moment, The two very different beings stared at each other across the space that separated them. Maya felt no fear now, only a strange sense of connection to this magnificent creature who had shown such unexpected gentleness. She held up the baby dinosaur, showing Kong that she had kept it safe during the battle. The great ape's expression softened, and he slowly lowered himself to a sitting position, bringing his enormous face closer to Maya's level. She could see the intelligence in his eyes, the same spark of consciousness that she recognized in her own people. This was no mindless beast. This was a thinking, feeling being who had chosen to protect an innocent life at the cost of his own safety. Maya set the baby dinosaur gently on the ground and approached Kong slowly, her hands open and empty to show she meant no harm. She began to speak to him in the soft, soothing tone she used to calm frightened animals, telling him about the healing plants she knew, about her village's knowledge of treating wounds. She did not know if he could understand her words, but she hoped he could sense her intent. Kong watched her carefully as she examined his wounds, his dark eyes following her every movement. When she began to clean one of the deeper cuts with water from her pouch, he flinched but did not pull away. It was as if he understood that this small human was trying to help him, just as he had helped the baby dinosaur. As Maya worked to tend Kong's injuries, using torn strips of her own clothing to bandage the worst cuts, she told him about her missing brother and her desperate search through the valley. She found herself pouring out her fears and hopes to this gentle giant, feeling somehow that he would understand her need to find Kale, even if the words meant nothing to him. When she finished treating his wounds as best she could, Maya stepped back and looked around the clearing. The baby dinosaur was still there, staying close to Kong, as if recognizing him as a protector. But Maya knew they could not stay in this exposed place. The sounds of battle would have carried far through the valley, and other predators would come to investigate. She needed to find shelter for Kong while he recovered, and she needed to continue her search for Kale. It was then that Kong surprised her. The great ape slowly rose to his feet, moving carefully to avoid reopening his wounds. He looked down at Maya and then at the baby dinosaur, and she could see him making some kind of decision. With infinite gentleness, he reached down and picked up the small creature, cradling it in one massive palm. Then he turned and began walking deeper into the valley, pausing to look back at Maya with an expression that clearly said, "Follow me." Maya did not hesitate. She gathered her belongings and hurried after Kong, trusting her instincts that told her this incredible being was offering to help her in her quest. As they moved through the jungle together, the most unlikely of companions, Maya felt a spark of hope ignite in her chest. Perhaps her journey into the Forbidden Valley would lead to more than just finding her brother. Perhaps it would lead to discoveries about courage, friendship, and the unexpected bonds that could form between the most different of creatures. The afternoon sun was beginning to sink toward the horizon when they finally stopped at what was clearly Kong's home. Hidden deep in the valley was a series of caves carved into the face of a towering cliff. The entrances were large enough to accommodate Kong's massive frame, and Maya could see that he had made this place into a sanctuary. Soft grasses and leaves covered the floors, and fresh water trickled down the rock walls from underground springs. As Kong carefully placed the baby dinosaur in a nest-like depression he had prepared, Maya realized that this was not the first time the great ape had rescued an orphan creature. This place was a refuge, a safe haven where Kong protected those who had no one else to care for them. Her heart swelled with admiration for this gentle giant who used his incredible strength not to dominate and destroy, but to protect and nurture. But as night began to fall over the valley, Maya knew that her greatest challenges still lay ahead. She had found an unexpected ally in Kong, and together they had saved the baby dinosaur from certain death. But Kale was still missing somewhere in this vast wilderness, and time was running out. Tomorrow would bring new dangers, new obstacles to overcome, and new tests of the courage that had brought her this far. As she settled down to rest in the safety of Kong's cave, with the great ape standing guard at the entrance, and the baby dinosaur sleeping peacefully nearby, Maya whispered a silent prayer to whatever gods watched over travelers in strange lands. She asked for strength to continue her search, wisdom to make the right choices, and the courage to face whatever tomorrow might bring. She had no way of knowing that her greatest adventure was just beginning, or that the bond she had forged today would soon be tested in ways she could never imagine. Dawn broke over the valley in a symphony of colors that painted the sky in shades of orange, pink, and gold. Maya woke to find herself covered with large leaves that Kong had gently placed over her during the night to keep her warm. The great ape was sitting at the cave entrance, silhouetted against the morning light, keeping watch over his unusual guests. The baby dinosaur was awake as well, making soft chirping sounds as it explored its new surroundings with the curious nature of all young creatures. Maya stretched and rose to her feet, feeling the stiffness in her muscle from the previous day's adventures. She checked Kong's wounds and was pleased to see that they were healing well. The great ape's natural resilience was remarkable, and her herbal treatments had helped prevent infection. As she worked, Kong watched her with those intelligent eyes, and she found herself wondering just how much he truly understood about the world around him. After sharing some of her dried fruit with the baby dinosaur, who seemed to enjoy the sweet taste, Maya turned to Kong and spoke earnestly about her need to continue searching for Kale. She drew pictures in the dirt with a stick, showing Kong the shape of a human figure, and tried to convey that she was looking for someone important to her. Kong studied her drawings carefully, his massive head tilted to one side in concentration. What happened next amazed Maya beyond words. Kong began making his own marks in the dirt, using one enormous finger to draw with surprising delicacy. His first drawing was clearly meant to represent Maya herself, a small stick figure with long hair. Next to it, he drew another similar figure, but this one appeared to be bound or trapped in some way. Kong looked at Maya and then pointed toward a specific direction in the valley, his meaning unmistakably clear. He had seen Kale. Somehow, somewhere in his travels through the valley, Kong had encountered Maya's brother, and from his drawing, it appeared that Kale was in some kind of trouble, possibly captured or imprisoned by something. Maya felt her heart racing with a mixture of hope and fear. Kale was alive, but he was in danger, and every moment they delayed could make his situation worse. Kong seemed to understand the urgency of the situation. He carefully picked up the baby dinosaur and placed it in a secure alcove within the cave, arranging soft leaves around it and positioning rocks to keep it safely contained. Maya realized he was preparing for a journey and planning to take her to where he had seen Kale. The trust this magnificent creature was showing in her was overwhelming, and she felt a deep sense of responsibility not to let him down. Before they left the cave, Kong did something that touched Maya's heart deeply. He went to the back of the cave and returned with several large, colorful feathers and a collection of smooth stones. With careful precision, he arranged these items around the baby dinosaur's resting place, creating what was clearly meant to be a comforting display. It was the behavior of a creature who understood beauty, who recognized that even the smallest beings deserve to be surrounded by lovely things. The journey through the valley that followed was unlike anything Maya could have imagined. Riding on Kong's shoulder, she saw the prehistoric world from a perspective that no human had ever experienced before. The great ape moved through the jungle with surprising grace for something so large, using his powerful arms to swing from the massive trees and his keen intelligence to navigate the safest paths through the dangerous terrain. From her elevated position, Maya could see the incredible diversity of life that flourished in the valley. Herds of enormous plant-eating dinosaurs grazed in clearings below, their long necks stretching up to reach the highest leaves. Flying reptiles with wingspans wider than her village soared overhead, their shadows passing over the jungle like moving clouds. In the distance, she could see other massive creatures moving through the trees, each one a wonder of nature that existed nowhere else in the world. But the valley was not just home to gentle giants. As they traveled, Maya also saw evidence of the predators that made this place so dangerous. Claw marks on tree trunks, enormous teeth scattered on the ground, and the bleached bones of creatures that had fallen victim to the endless cycle of hunt and be hunted. Kong navigated these hazards with the wisdom of long experience, avoiding areas where dangerous predators were likely to be lurking and choosing routes that offered both speed and safety. As the morning progressed, Kong began to show signs of increased alertness. His massive head turned constantly from side to side, and Maya could feel the tension in his muscles as he moved. They were approaching something that made even the mighty Kong nervous, and Maya felt her own anxiety growing in response. Whatever held her brother captive was powerful enough to concern a creature who had no natural enemies in this valley. The answer to Kong's nervousness became apparent when they crested a ridge and looked down into a narrow canyon below. Maya's breath caught in her throat as she saw what lay before them. Built into the canyon walls was a structure that defied everything she thought she knew about her world. It was clearly artificial, constructed by intelligent beings, but the architecture was unlike anything her people had ever created. The structure was massive, built from enormous blocks of stone that fit together with perfect precision. Tall spires reached toward the sky, carved with intricate designs that seemed to tell stories in a language Maya could not understand. Bridges of stone spanned the width of the canyon, connecting different levels of the complex in a web of walkways that appeared to float in midair. This was not the work of primitive hunters and gatherers like her own people. This was the creation of a civilization far more advanced than anything she had ever dreamed possible. But what made Maya's heart race with fear was not the impressive architecture. It was the creatures that moved through and around the structure like guards protecting their territory. These beings walked upright like humans, but they were much larger and more powerful. Their skin was covered in scales that gleamed green and gold in the sunlight, and their faces combined human intelligence with reptilian features that spoke of predatory instincts. Kong remained hidden in the trees as Maya studied the scene below. She could see movement throughout the structure, evidence of a large population of these reptilian beings. Some appear to be working on construction projects, expanding their already impressive complex. Others seem to be engaged in activities that Maya could not identify from her distant vantage point. But all of them moved with the coordinated purpose of a highly organized society. It was then that Maya spotted something that made her heart leap with both joy and terror. In a courtyard near the center of the complex, she could see a small figure that was unmistakably human. Even from this distance, she recognized the way Kale moved The particular way he held his head when he was trying to appear brave despite being frightened. Her brother was alive, but he was clearly being held prisoner by these mysterious reptilian people. Maya watched as Kale was led from one building to another by two of the guards. He did not appear to be injured, but there was something about his posture that suggested he was not being treated kindly. Maya felt a fierce, protective anger rising in her chest, the same emotion that had driven her to leap into the battle between Kong and the predators. No one had the right to hold her brother captive, regardless of how advanced their civilization might be. Kong seemed to sense her emotional reaction to seeing Kale. The great ape placed one massive hand gently over Maya, a gesture of comfort and understanding that nearly brought tears to her eyes. Without words, he was telling her that they would find a way to rescue her brother, that she was not alone in this seemingly impossible task. But as Maya continued to observe the reptilian city, she began to realize just how challenging their rescue mission would be. The complex was heavily guarded, with sentries posted at regular intervals throughout the structure. The beings who lived there were obviously intelligent and organized, capable of working together in ways that made them far more dangerous than any mindless predator. And they were on their home territory, with advantages that Maya could not even begin to understand. As if the situation were not complicated enough, Maya noticed something else that made her stomach clench with worry. In various parts of the complex, she could see cages and enclosures that held different types of creatures. Some contained smaller dinosaurs. Others held animals she could not identify from her distance. It appeared that these reptilian people were collectors of some kind, gathering specimens from throughout the valley for reasons that Maya could only guess at. The implications were terrifying. If Kale was being held as some kind of specimen, his captors might have plans for him that Maya did not want to imagine. The urgency of rescuing him had just increased dramatically, but so had the apparent impossibility of the task. How could one young woman and one wounded giant ape hope to succeed against an entire civilization of advanced reptilian beings? Kong must have been thinking along similar lines, because he began to back away from their observation point, moving deeper into the jungle where they could plan their next move without being detected. Maya could see that he was troubled by what they had discovered, his massive brow furrowed in concentration as he considered the challenges they faced. When they finally stopped in a secluded clearing, Kong began to draw in the dirt again, this time creating an elaborate map of the reptilian complex. His memory was incredible, capturing details of the structure that Maya had not even noticed during their brief observation. As he worked, Maya realized that this was not the first time Kong had encountered these beings. His knowledge of their city was too detailed, too precise for someone seeing it for the first time. Maya began to ask Kong questions, using gestures and drawings to communicate. Gradually, a story emerged that filled in many of the gaps in her understanding. The reptilian people had been in the valley for countless generations, building their civilization in secret while the rest of the world remained primitive. They considered themselves the rightful rulers of this place, and they viewed all other creatures, including Kong, as inferior beings to be studied, captured, or eliminated as they saw fit. Kong's own encounters with them had been numerous and always hostile. They had tried to capture him many times, using nets and traps designed specifically for creatures of his size and strength. He had always managed to escape, but not without cost. Several of his wounds from previous battles had been inflicted by their weapons, and Maya realized that his decision to help her rescue Kale was putting him in direct conflict with his most dangerous enemies. As the afternoon wore on, Maya and Kong worked together to develop a plan for infiltrating the reptilian city. It would require all of Maya's human cunning and Kong's intimate knowledge of the valley's geography. They would have to time their approach perfectly, taking advantage of the natural cycles of the valley's wildlife to create distractions and cover their movements. The first part of their plan involved returning to Kong's cave to gather supplies and check on the baby dinosaur. Maya had noticed that the reptilian guards seemed to be most active during the day, which suggested they might have better luck approaching the complex under cover of darkness. They would need torches, rope, and any other tools they could improvise from the materials available to them. As they made their way back through the jungle, Maya found herself thinking about the incredible turn her life had taken. Just days ago, she had been an ordinary member of her tribe, bound by the same fears and limitations that restricted all of her people. Now she was planning to infiltrate an advanced civilization alongside a legendary creature, attempting a rescue that would have been impossible for any human to accomplish alone. The baby dinosaur was exactly where they had left it, safe in its nest of leaves and stones. It chirped happily when it saw them return, and Maya was pleased to see that it had eaten some of the fruits they had left for it. The little creature was growing stronger and more confident each day, and Maya could see the intelligence developing in its bright eyes. Soon it would be old enough to survive on its own, but for now it still needed protection and care. Kong went to work gathering materials for their mission, while Maya tended to the baby dinosaur and prepared what food she could for the journey ahead. She found herself talking to the little creature as she worked, telling it about her brother and their dangerous mission. The dinosaur seemed to listen intently, its head tilted in an attitude of attention that reminded Maya of a faithful dog. As evening began to fall over the valley, Maya felt a mixture of nervousness and determination settling over her like a familiar cloak. She had committed herself to a course of action that could very well result in her death, but she could not turn back now. Kale was depending on her, and she would not abandon him to whatever fate the reptilian people had planned for him. Kong finished his preparations as the last light of day faded from the sky. He had gathered coils of strong vines, sharp stones that could be used as weapons, and several thick branches that could serve as clubs in an emergency. Maya added her own small contributions to their arsenal, including the healing herbs that had proven so useful in treating Kong's wounds and a fire-making kit that might prove essential if they needed to signal each other during their mission. Before they left for the reptilian city, Kong did something that surprised Maya. He approached the baby dinosaur and began making soft sounds, a gentle rumbling that seemed to come from deep in his chest. The little creature responded with its own chirping calls, and Maya realized she was witnessing a conversation between two very different species who had found a way to communicate beyond the barriers of language. When Kong finished speaking to the baby dinosaur, he turned to Maya with an expression that she had learned to recognize as his way of asking a question. She looked from Kong to the little creature and suddenly understood what he was trying to tell her. The baby dinosaur wanted to come with them. Despite its small size and obvious vulnerability, it was trying to volunteer for their dangerous mission. Maya's first instinct was to refuse. The rescue attempt would be perilous enough without having to worry about protecting such a small and helpless creature. But as she looked into the baby dinosaur's eyes, she saw something there that made her reconsider. This little being understood that they were trying to help someone who was in trouble, and it wanted to contribute to that effort in whatever way it could. Kong seemed to approve of the baby dinosaur's desire to help. He carefully fashioned a carrier from soft leaves and vines, creating a secure pouch that would allow the little creature to travel safely while leaving Kong's hands free for fighting if necessary. Maya realized that Kong's intelligence included an understanding of loyalty and courage that went far beyond simple animal instincts. As they prepared to leave the safety of the cave for what might be the last time, Maya took a moment to appreciate the unlikely family they had become. A human girl, a giant ape, and a baby dinosaur, united by their shared commitment to doing what was right despite the dangers they faced. If her village could see her now, they would think she had gone completely mad. But Maya had never felt more certain about anything in her life. The journey to the reptilian city would take them through some of the most dangerous parts of the valley, past the territories of nocturnal predators that hunted in the darkness. But they had each other, they had a plan, and they had the kind of determination that could move mountains. As Kong lifted Maya to his shoulder and secured the baby dinosaur in its carrier, Maya whispered a prayer for success and closed her eyes, preparing herself for whatever challenges the night might bring. The valley transformed completely once darkness fell over the ancient world. What had seemed mysterious and beautiful in daylight became a realm of shadows and whispered threats. The very air seemed thicker, filled with the sounds of creatures that emerged only when the sun disappeared beyond the horizon. Maya clung tightly to Kong's shoulder as they moved through this nighttime wilderness, trusting in his enhanced senses to guide them safely through dangers she could not even see. Kong moved with incredible caution in the darkness, each step carefully planned and executed. His massive frame, which made him nearly unstoppable in direct confrontation, now became a challenge as he attempted to travel silently through dense vegetation. Maya marveled at how such an enormous creature could move with such delicate precision, avoiding branches that might crack under his weight and choosing paths that would not leave obvious tracks for their enemies to follow. The baby dinosaur seemed to understand the need for absolute quiet during their journey. It remained perfectly still in its carrier, making no sound that might betray their location to the nocturnal hunters that ruled this domain. Occasionally, Maya felt the little creature shift slightly against Kong's chest, but it never cried out or made the playful noises that had characterized its behavior during the day. Even at its young age, it possessed the instinctive understanding that survival sometimes required perfect silence. As they drew closer to the reptilian city, the landscape around them began to change in subtle ways that Maya found deeply unsettling. The natural chaos of the jungle gave way to areas that showed clear signs of artificial modification. Trees had been cut and arranged in specific patterns, creating barriers and channels that would funnel intruders toward easily defended positions. The very ground beneath Kong's feet had been altered, with hidden pits and carefully placed obstacles that would trip up anyone unfamiliar with their locations. Kong navigated these defensive measures with the expertise of someone who had encountered them before, but his increased caution told Maya that they were entering truly dangerous territory. Each step forward brought them closer to their goal, but also deeper into a web of defenses that had been designed by intelligent minds specifically to capture or kill creatures like them. The first sight of the reptilian city at night was both magnificent and terrifying. The massive structure was illuminated by fires that burned in carefully placed braziers throughout the complex, creating a display of dancing light and shadow that made the alien architecture even more imposing. From their hidden position in the jungle, Maya could see reptilian guards moving along the walls and bridges, their scaled forms clearly visible against the firelight. But it was not just the guards that made Maya's heart race with fear. The entire city seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy that spoke of purposes she could not understand. Strange sounds echoed from within the buildings, mechanical noises that had no place in the natural world. Occasionally, she caught glimpses of green light emanating from some of the structures, an unnatural glow that made her skin crawl with instinctive dread. Kong carefully positioned them in a concealed location that offered a clear view of the city while keeping them hidden from the patrolling guards. From here, they could observe the patterns of movement within the complex and identify the building where Kale was being held. Maya strained her eyes in the darkness, searching for any sign of her brother among the alien structures that stretched before them. The reptilian beings moved through their city with the efficient purposefulness of a highly organized society. Maya watched as groups of them gathered in various locations, engaged in activities that seemed to follow specific schedules and protocols. Some appeared to be maintaining the fires that provided illumination. Others were involved in construction work that continued even during the night hours. But it was a third group that captured Maya's most intense attention. Near the center of the complex, a procession of reptilian guards was escorting several prisoners from one building to another. Even at this distance, Maya could distinguish the human figures among the captives by their smaller size and different movement patterns. Her heart leaped as she recognized Kale's distinctive silhouette among the group. But her relief at seeing him alive was tempered by the obvious distress in his posture and movements. The prisoners were being taken into a building that was different from all the others Maya had observed. This structure was taller and more elaborately decorated, with carved symbols that seemed to glow with their own inner light. Multiple guards surrounded its entrance, and Maya could see that access to this building was clearly restricted even among the reptilian people themselves. Whatever purpose this building served, it was obviously of critical importance to the entire complex. Kong studied the scene with the same intense concentration Maya had observed when he was planning their route through the valley. His massive head moved slightly as he tracked the movements of the guards and identified the various entry points to the building. Maya could almost see him calculating distances, timing the patrol patterns, and developing strategies for breaching the complex's defenses. After what felt like hours of observation, Kong began to move again, leading them around the perimeter of the city to approach from a different angle. Maya realized that he was looking for weaknesses in the defenses, gaps in the guard coverage that might provide them with an opportunity to enter the complex undetected. The reptilian people might be intelligent and organized, but they had not anticipated an attack from a creature of Kong's size and capabilities. The section of the city Kong eventually chose for their approach was built against a steep cliff face, with the lowest level of the structure extending directly into the rock wall. Maya could see that this area was less heavily guarded than the main entrances, probably because the builders had assumed the cliff itself would provide adequate protection from intruders. They had not considered the possibility that someone might approach from above, using the cliff as a pathway rather than a barrier. Kong began his descent of the cliff face with the same careful precision he had shown throughout their journey. His enormous hands found holds in the rock that would have been invisible to Maya, and his powerful muscles allowed him to support not only his own massive weight, but also his two passengers as they slowly made their way down toward the city below. Maya held her breath as loose stones occasionally broke free under Kong's weight, but the great ape's balance was so perfect that he managed to catch or deflect them before they could fall and alert the guard below. The baby dinosaur remained perfectly still during the terrifying descent, but Maya could feel its tiny heart racing against her chest where she held it securely. She whispered soft words of comfort to the little creature, as much to calm her own fears as to reassure her small companion. The drop below them seemed endless, and Maya tried not to think about what would happen if Kong lost his grip or if the guards noticed their approach. As they drew closer to the level of the city, Maya could see the details of the reptilian architecture much more clearly. The buildings were constructed with a precision that spoke of advanced engineering knowledge, with joints between stones that were so tight they appeared to be carved from single massive blocks. The decorative elements were not merely ornamental, but seemed to serve specific functions, with some carvings acting as channels for water drainage and others providing handholds for climbing. Kong finally reached a position where he could observe the guards directly below them without being seen. The reptilian sentries moved in predictable patterns, following routes that took them past specific checkpoints at regular intervals. Maya watched Kong study these patterns with the intensity of a master strategist, timing each guard's movement and identifying the brief windows of opportunity when certain areas would be unobserved. When Kong was satisfied that he understood the guard rotations, he began the final phase of their descent. This was the most dangerous part of their approach, as they would be completely exposed if any of the guard happened to look up at the wrong moment. Kong moved with impossible silence for a creature of his size, his massive form seeming to flow down the rock face like a shadow, given substance. Maya felt her feet touch solid ground for the first time in what felt like hours, and she had to fight the urge to collapse with relief. They were now inside the reptilian city, hidden in a narrow alcove between two buildings that provided temporary concealment from the patrolling guards. But they were still far from their goal, and every moment they remained in this place increased the risk of discovery. The baby dinosaur was clearly excited to be moving again after the long, motionless journey down the cliff. It made soft, chirping sounds that Kong quickly silenced with a gentle touch, reminding the little creature that absolute quiet was still essential for their survival. Maya marveled at how quickly the baby had learned to trust Kong's judgment, responding immediately to his signals even though they came from a completely different species. From their hiding place, Maya could hear the sounds of the reptilian city around them. Voices speaking in a language she could not understand echoed from nearby buildings, mixed with mechanical noises that suggested the use of tools and devices far more advanced than anything her people possessed. The air carried strange smells, a mixture of burning oil, exotic spices, and something else that Maya could not identify, but that made her nervous on an instinctive level. Kong carefully peered around the edge of their concealment, checking to ensure their path was clear before moving deeper into the complex. Maya followed close behind him, acutely aware that her human-sized form was much easier to spot than Kong's ability to blend into the shadows. She tried to match his movements exactly, stepping where he stepped and pausing when he paused, trusting his experience to keep them hidden from their enemies. As they moved through the city, Maya began to notice details that revealed more about the reptilian civilization. The buildings were arranged in a specific hierarchy, with the largest and most elaborate structures clearly serving as centers of power or importance. The smaller buildings appeared to be workshops or storage areas, while others might have been living quarters for the common members of their society. The technology on display was far beyond anything Maya had ever imagined possible. She saw devices that produced light without fire, tools that appeared to be made from materials that did not exist in her world, and mechanisms whose purposes she could not even guess. This civilization had clearly been developing for much longer than her own people had existed, accumulating knowledge and capabilities that made them formidable opponents. But Maya also noticed something else that gave her hope. Despite their advanced technology and impressive city, the reptilian people showed the same kinds of behavioral patterns as any organized group. They had routines, schedules, and habits that created predictable weaknesses in their security. Kong was exploiting these weaknesses with the skill of someone who had learned their patterns through long observation and previous conflicts. The building where Kale was being held loomed ahead of them, its imposing mass blocking out a significant portion of the star-filled sky. Up close, Maya could see that the structure was even more elaborate than it had appeared from a distance. The walls were covered with carvings that told stories in the reptilian language, depicting scenes of conquest, discovery, and what appeared to be scientific experimentation. Maya shuddered as she realized that her brother might be the subject of such experiments. Kong led them to a service entrance on the side of the building, a smaller door that was probably used by maintenance workers or lower-level personnel. The guards here were less numerous, but they were still present and alert. Maya watched as Kong studied their positions and timing, calculating the exact moment when they could approach the door without being seen. When that moment came, Kong moved with explosive speed that seemed impossible for something so large. One moment, they were hidden in the shadows. The next, they were pressed against the wall beside the entrance, having covered the distance in complete silence. Maya's heart was pounding so loudly she was sure the guards would hear it, but Kong's massive form shielded her from view as he examined the door mechanism. The door was secured with a locking system that was completely foreign to Maya's experience, but Kong approached it with the confidence of someone who had encountered similar devices before. Using his massive fingers with surprising delicacy, he manipulated the mechanism until something clicked softly and the door swung inward on silent hinges. They slipped through the opening into a corridor that was dimly lit by the same green glow Maya had observed from outside. The walls here were smooth and warm to the touch, made from a material that seemed to pulse with life. Strange symbols were carved into the walls at regular intervals, and Maya had the unsettling feeling that these markings were more than mere decoration. Kong moved through the corridors with the assurance of someone following a mental map, turning left and right at specific points as if he knew exactly where he was going. Maya realized that this was not his first time inside this building, and she wondered what previous encounters had taught him about its layout. The thought that Kong had been here before, possibly as a prisoner himself, made her even more determined to succeed in their mission. As they penetrated deeper into the building, the sounds around them began to change. The mechanical noises grew louder and more complex, accompanied by voices that carried the tone of authority and instruction. Maya could hear what sounded like orders being given, responses being provided, and the general bustle of organized activity. Whatever was happening in this building, it involved multiple reptilian people working together on projects of obvious importance. Kong suddenly stopped and pressed himself against a wall, motioning for Maya to remain absolutely still. Footsteps were approaching from around a corner ahead, the distinctive sound of reptilian feet on stone flooring. Maya held her breath as two guards passed by their hiding place, engaged in conversation in their alien language. She could not understand their words, but their tone suggested they were discussing routine matters, unaware that intruders had penetrated their secure facility. When the guards had passed and their footsteps faded into silence, Kong continued forward until they reached a junction where multiple corridors met. Here, he paused to listen carefully, his enhanced hearing apparently detecting sounds that Maya could not perceive. After a moment, he chose the corridor that led upward toward what Maya assumed were the upper levels of the building. The corridor they followed was lined with doorways that were sealed with the same type of mechanism Kong had defeated at the building's entrance. Through some of these doors, Maya could hear sounds that made her blood run cold. There were cries that might have come from animals in distress, mechanical noises that suggested the operation of complex equipment, and voices speaking with the clinical detachment of people conducting experiments. Kong stopped at one particular door and placed his massive ear against its surface, listening intently to whatever was happening on the other side. After a long moment, he turned to Maya with an expression that combined hope and urgency. She understood immediately that he had located the source of the sounds they were seeking. Somewhere behind this door, Kale was waiting for rescue. But as Kong began to work on the door's locking mechanism, Maya heard something that made her heart sink with dread. From somewhere deeper in the building came the sound of alarms, harsh mechanical noises that could only mean one thing. Their presence had been discovered, and the entire complex was being alerted to the intrusion. Within moments, guards would be swarming toward their location, and their slim chance of escape would disappear entirely. Kong's massive hands worked faster on the lock, but Maya could already hear the sounds of running feet echoing through the corridors around them. The baby dinosaur seemed to sense the danger and pressed itself closer to Maya's chest, its tiny body trembling with fear. Time was running out, and Maya realized that their rescue mission was about to become a desperate fight for survival against impossible odds. The lock finally clicked open just as the first group of guards rounded the corner and spotted them. In that moment, Maya saw her brother's face through the doorway, alive but obviously terrified by the chaos erupting around him. Kong roared his defiance at the approaching guards while reaching for Kale with one massive hand. The final phase of their rescue mission was about to begin, and Maya knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The corridor erupted into chaos as Kong's mighty roar echoed through the building, a sound so powerful that the very walls seemed to vibrate with its force. The approaching guards stopped in their tracks, momentarily stunned by the sight of the legendary giant ape standing within their supposedly secure facility. In that brief instant of hesitation, Maya darted through the open doorway to reach her brother. Kale was chained to the wall of a small cell, his wrists bound with metal restraints that bore the intricate craftsmanship typical of the reptilian civilization. His face was pale and drawn from his captivity, but his eyes brightened with disbelief and joy when he saw Maya rushing toward him. She could see that he had been treated roughly, but was not seriously injured, though the fear and confusion of his imprisonment had clearly taken their toll on his spirit. The baby dinosaur chirped excitedly from Maya's arms, seemingly recognizing that they had found the person they had been searching for. Despite the danger of their situation, Kale's eyes widened with wonder as he saw the little creature that had become part of their unlikely rescue party. Even in his weakened state, he could appreciate the extraordinary nature of what was happening around him. Kong filled the doorway behind Maya, his massive frame blocking the view of the guards while she worked frantically to free her brother from his restraints. The metal clasps were complex mechanisms that required both strength and precision to operate, and Maya's hands shook with adrenaline and urgency as she struggled with the unfamiliar devices. Every second that passed brought more guards rushing toward their location, and she could hear Kong engaging the first wave of attackers in the corridor outside. The battle that followed was unlike anything Maya had ever witnessed. Kong fought with a controlled fury that demonstrated both his incredible power and his surprising intelligence. Rather than simply lashing out at his enemies, he used the confined space of the corridor to his advantage, positioning himself so that the guards could only approach him a few at a time. His massive fists struck with precision, disabling opponents without necessarily killing them, while his powerful legs kicked and swept to prevent the reptilian warriors from surrounding him. But the guards were not helpless victims. They wielded weapons that Maya had never seen before, devices that crackled with energy and could apparently inflict pain at a distance. She saw Kong flinch and roar as these weapons struck him, though his thick hide and natural resilience prevented them from causing serious damage. The reptilian fighters also displayed tactical intelligence, working together to try to exploit weaknesses in Kong's defenses and calling for reinforcements when their initial assault proved insufficient. Maya finally managed to free Kale from his restraints, and her brother immediately threw his arms around her in a desperate embrace. For a moment, she allowed herself to feel the relief and joy of their reunion, but the sounds of battle outside quickly reminded her that their situation was still desperately dangerous. Kong could not hold off the entire reptilian military forever, and they needed to find a way to escape before overwhelming numbers of enemies arrived. Kale was weak from his imprisonment, but determined to help with their escape. As Maya explained their situation in hurried whispers, he shared what he had learned during his captivity about the layout of the building and the habits of his captors. The reptilian people had interrogated him extensively, trying to learn about the location of human settlements and the capabilities of his people. His refusal to provide this information had clearly frustrated them, but it had also given him opportunities to observe their behaviors and routines. According to Kale, the building they were in served as both a prison and a research facility where the reptilian people studied the creatures they captured from throughout the valley. He had seen other prisoners during his time here, including several animals that were being subjected to various forms of experimentation. The knowledge that this place was essentially a laboratory for studying captive beings made Maya even more determined to destroy it if possible during their escape. Kong's roars from the corridor were becoming more strained, indicating that the battle was taking its toll on even his incredible stamina. Maya knew they had to act quickly to support him before the weight of numbers overwhelmed their protector. She handed the baby dinosaur to Kale, whose eyes widened further as he realized the trust being placed in him, and began to search the cell for anything that might serve as a weapon or tool. The cell contained several pieces of reptilian equipment that had been used to study Kale during his captivity. Maya did not understand the purpose of most of these devices, but she recognized that some of them were clearly sources of energy or power. If she could figure out how to use them as weapons, they might be able to even the odds in their fight against the guards. Working with desperate improvisation, Maya began dismantling one of the energy devices, trying to expose its internal components in a way that might make it unstable. She had no real understanding of the technology involved, but she hoped that disrupting its normal function might cause it to release its stored energy in a destructive burst. The risk of accidentally harming herself or her companions was enormous, but their current situation left no room for caution. As Maya worked, Kale moved to the cell doorway to observe the battle raging in the corridor. Kong was still holding his ground, but the number of guards attacking him had doubled, and more were arriving every moment. The reptilian warriors had also brought heavier weapons to bear, devices that seemed to fire projectiles of concentrated energy that left smoking craters in the stone walls when they missed their target. The baby dinosaur seemed to understand the gravity of their situation despite its young age. It remained quiet and still in Kale's arms, but its bright eyes tracked every movement in the corridor outside. Maya found herself wondering if the little creature possessed the same kind of enhanced intelligence that Kong displayed, and whether it might be capable of contributing to their escape in ways she had not anticipated. Maya's improvised weapon finally reached a state of dangerous instability, sparking and humming with barely contained energy. She had no idea what would happen when she activated it, but the increasing volume of Kong's struggles convinced her that desperate measures were their only option. She carefully positioned the device where it would have maximum effect on their attackers while minimizing the risk to Kong and her own group. When Maya triggered her makeshift explosive, the results exceeded her wildest expectations. The energy device detonated in a brilliant flash that temporarily blinded everyone in the corridor, followed by a shockwave that knocked several guards off their feet. The blast also damaged the building structure, causing sections of the ceiling to collapse and creating barriers that separated Kong from some of his attackers. Kong seized the opportunity created by Maya's intervention, using the confusion and structural damage to break through the guard formation and create a path toward potential escape routes. His massive fist smashed through weakened walls, and his powerful legs propelled him over the debris left by the explosion. For the first time since the battle began, Maya felt a spark of hope that they might actually succeed in escaping from this seemingly impossible situation. But their triumph was short-lived. The explosion had not only damaged the immediate area, but had also triggered additional alarm systems throughout the complex. Maya could hear the sounds of much larger forces mobilizing in response to the emergency, and she realized that they had only bought themselves a temporary reprieve. The entire reptilian military would soon be converging on their location, and no amount of courage or improvisation would be sufficient to fight their way through such overwhelming opposition. Kong seemed to reach the same conclusion, because he began moving with even greater urgency toward what appeared to be an external wall of the building. Maya understood his intention immediately and gathered Kale and the baby dinosaur as they prepared to follow Kong in what could only be described as a desperate leap of faith. If they cannot fight their way out of the building, they would have to make their own exit through the most direct route possible. The external wall that Kong had chosen was constructed from the same advanced materials as the rest of the building, but it was not designed to withstand assault from someone of his strength and size. His massive fists began to pound against the wall with rhythmic force, each blow sending cracks spreading through the alien stonework. The baby dinosaur chirped in what sounded like encouragement, while Kale watched the proceedings with the amazement of someone witnessing the impossible. As Kong worked to breach the wall, Maya kept watch for approaching guards while also trying to understand their location within the building. They appeared to be several stories above ground level, which meant that escaping through the wall would involve a significant fall. The prospect of dropping such a distance was terrifying, but staying in the building meant certain capture or death at the hands of their increasingly numerous enemies. The wall finally gave way under Kong's relentless assault, crumbling outward to create a jagged opening that revealed the night sky beyond. Cool air rushed into the damaged cell, carrying with it the sounds of activity throughout the reptilian city as the entire complex responded to the emergency within their research facility. Maya could see lights moving in other buildings and hear voices calling out in the alien language as the reptilian people organized their response to the intrusion. Kong carefully examined the drop outside the breach he had created, calculating the risks and possibilities for their escape. The building they were in was indeed several stories high, built against the cliff face that formed one side of the valley. Below them lay a network of smaller structures and connecting bridges that might provide a route to the ground level if they could reach them safely. Without hesitation, Kong began his descent from the damaged building, using his incredible strength and agility to find handholds on the exterior surface while protecting his smaller companions from the dangers of the climb. Maya clung tightly to his shoulder while Kale rode securely in Kong's other arm, both humans trusting completely in the great ape's ability to carry them to safety. The baby dinosaur seemed to enjoy the wild ride, making soft sounds that might have been expressions of excitement rather than fear. Maya found herself amazed once again by the adaptability and resilience of the little creature, who had faced dangers that would have terrified much larger animals without losing its essential spirit of curiosity and trust. As they descended toward the lower levels of the city, Maya could see that their escape had not gone unnoticed. Reptilian guards were streaming out of buildings throughout the complex, some carrying torches and others wielding the advanced weapons they used for hunting large prey. Search parties were being organized with military efficiency, and it was clear that the reptilian people were treating their escape as a serious threat to their security. Kong reached the lower level of the city and immediately began moving toward the perimeter, seeking the fastest route back to the jungle, where they would have the advantage of familiar terrain and natural cover. But the reptilian guards had anticipated this strategy and were already positioning themselves to block the most obvious escape routes. Maya realized that they would have to fight their way out of the city, facing opponents who knew the terrain better and had superior numbers and weapons. The first group of guards they encountered tried to surround Kong using coordinated tactics, approaching from multiple directions while their comrades provided covering fire with energy weapons. But Kong had learned from his earlier battle in the research building, and he used environmental features to break up their formation. He knocked over support pillars to create obstacles, threw debris to disrupt their aim, and used his superior reach to strike at enemies who thought they were safely out of range. Maya found herself once again impressed by Kong's intelligence and adaptability. This was not the mindless rampage of an enraged beast, but the calculated fighting of a strategic mind that understood how to turn apparent disadvantages into strengths. Every movement Kong made served multiple purposes, whether advancing toward their escape route, protecting his companions, or disrupting the coordination of their enemies. But as they fought their way through the outer defenses of the city, Maya began to realize that their greatest challenge still lay ahead. Between them and the safety of the jungle stretched an open area that would provide no cover from the energy weapons of their pursuers. Kong would be completely exposed during the final dash to freedom, and Maya was not sure that even his incredible resilience would be enough to survive concentrated fire from dozens of reptilian warriors. It was then that the baby dinosaur surprised everyone by taking an active role in their escape. The little creature began making loud, piercing calls that echoed throughout the valley, sounds that carried much further than anything so small should have been able to produce. Maya initially feared that these calls would only serve to alert more enemies to their location, but she soon realized that the baby was communicating with others of its kind who lived wild in the jungle beyond the city. The response to the baby dinosaur's calls came from the darkness beyond the reptilian complex, a chorus of answering cries that grew rapidly in volume and intensity. Maya felt Kong's muscles tense with anticipation as he recognized the significance of what was happening. The baby's distress calls had summoned its extended family, and help was coming from the most unexpected source imaginable. The first adult dinosaurs emerged from the jungle just as Kong reached the edge of the open area between the city and freedom. These were creatures similar to the baby, but fully grown, their size and power making them formidable opponents for even the well-armed reptilian guards. Maya realized that Kong's compassion in rescuing the baby had created an alliance that might save all their lives. As the adult dinosaurs charged in a battle against the reptilian forces, Kong seized the opportunity to complete their escape. With Maya, Kale, and the baby secured safely in his care, he bounded across the open ground toward the welcoming darkness of the jungle. Behind them, the sounds of battle echoed through the night as two very different species fought for control of the ancient valley. The jungle welcomed them back like an old friend greeting long-lost family members. As Kong carried Maya and Kale deeper into the protective embrace of the massive trees, the sounds of battle behind them gradually faded into the distance. The baby dinosaur had stopped its urgent calling once its family had answered the summons, but Maya could still hear the occasional roar or crash from the direction of the reptilian city as the conflict continued between the adult dinosaurs and their ancient enemies. Kong did not stop moving until they had traveled far enough into the jungle to be completely hidden from any pursuit. Only then did he allow himself to rest, carefully lowering Maya and Kale to the soft ground beneath a canopy of leaves so thick that even the starlight could barely penetrate to reach them. The great apes' breathing was labored from their desperate escape, and Maya could see that his wounds from the earlier battles were still causing him pain despite her attempts to treat them. Kale sat in stunned silence for several long minutes, trying to process everything that had happened to him over the past few days. His capture by the reptilian people, his imprisonment in their research facility, and his miraculous rescue by his sister and her extraordinary companions seemed too incredible to be real. When he finally found his voice, it was filled with amazement and gratitude as he tried to express his thanks to Kong for the risks the great ape had taken to save him. Maya watched with deep emotion as her brother attempted to communicate with Kong, using the same combination of gestures and simple words as she had discovered worked best with their massive protector. Kong responded with gentle patience, seeming to understand that Kale needed time to adjust to the reality of their situation. The intelligence and compassion that Kong displayed continued to amaze Maya, confirming her belief that this magnificent creature was far more than the mindless monster her people's legends had described. The baby dinosaur had become noticeably more active since hearing the voices of its family during the battle at the reptilian city. It chirped and moved constantly, clearly eager to reunite with the other members of its species who had come to their aid. Maya realized that the time had come to make a decision about the little creature's future. While she had grown deeply attached to the baby during their adventures together, she knew that it belonged with its own kind rather than continuing to travel with humans and a giant ape. Kong seemed to reach the same conclusion about the baby's needs. As dawn began to break over the valley, he gently took the little dinosaur from Maya's arms and began making the soft, rumbling sounds that she had learned was his way of communicating with other creatures. The baby responded with its own chirping calls, and Maya found herself witnessing what was clearly a farewell conversation between two beings who had formed an unexpected bond. When Kong finished speaking to the baby dinosaur, he turned to Maya and Kale with an expression that conveyed both sadness and determination. Maya understood immediately what he was trying to tell them. Kong intended to take the baby back to rejoin its family, but this would mean that their time together was coming to an end. The great ape had his own responsibilities and his own life to return to, just as Maya and Kale needed to find their way back to their human tribe. The prospect of separating from Kong filled Maya with an unexpected sense of loss. Over the course of their incredible adventure together, she had developed a deep respect and affection for the giant ape that went far beyond simple gratitude for his help. Kong had shown her that intelligence and compassion could exist in forms she had never imagined, and that the boundaries between different species were not as absolute as she had always believed. But Maya also understood that their partnership had always been temporary. Kong belonged in the wild valley where he could protect the creatures that needed his strength and wisdom. She and Kale belonged with their own people where they could share the knowledge and understanding they had gained from their extraordinary experiences. The bonds they had formed would remain forever strong, but their paths needed to diverge so that each could fulfill their proper role in the world. As they prepared to part ways, Kong did something that surprised both Maya and Kale. The great ape began gathering materials from the jungle around them, working with careful precision to create what appeared to be some kind of gift or token. He wove together vines and leaves, embedded colorful feathers and smooth stones into the design, and shaped the entire creation into a form that was both beautiful and meaningful. When Kong finished his work, he presented his creation to Maya with a ceremony that reminded her of the formal exchanges that took place between tribal leaders when important agreements were made. The gift was clearly meant to serve as more than simple decoration. It was a symbol of their alliance, a physical reminder of the friendship that had formed between them despite the enormous differences in their size and species. Maya accepted Kong's gift with the solemnity it deserved, understanding that she was receiving something of profound significance. In return, she offered Kong the stone knife that her father had made for her, the weapon that had served her so well during their adventures together. Kong examined the knife carefully, clearly recognizing its importance to Maya and the honor she was doing him by offering it as a gift. The baby dinosaur seemed to understand that something important was taking place, because it began making soft singing sounds that reminded Maya of the lullabies her mother had sung when she was very young. The little creature's contribution to their farewell ceremony was perhaps the most touching of all, a reminder that even the youngest beings could recognize the significance of friendship and loss. As Kong prepared to leave with the baby dinosaur, he spent several minutes creating another set of drawings in the dirt. These were not maps or battle plans like his earlier illustrations, but something more like a story told in pictures. Maya watched as he depicted their entire adventure together, from their first meeting in the clearing to their successful rescue of Kale and escape from the reptilian city. Kong's artistic abilities were remarkable, and his final drawing showed Maya and Kale returning safely to their tribal village while Kong and the baby dinosaur rejoined their respective families in the deeper parts of the valley. But the most important element of his pictorial story was the way he illustrated the ongoing connection between them, showing that their friendship would continue even though their physical separation was necessary. When Kong finished his drawings, he stood and gathered the baby dinosaur carefully in his arms. The great ape looked down at Maya and Kale one last time, his expression conveying more emotion than any words could have expressed. Then he turned and began walking deeper into the jungle, his massive form gradually disappearing among the trees until only the sound of his footsteps remained, and finally, even that faded into silence. Maya and Kale sat quietly for a long time after Kong departed, both of them feeling the profound impact of saying goodbye to such an extraordinary friend. The baby dinosaur's cheerful chirping could still be heard in the distance, growing fainter as Kong carried it toward its reunion with the adult members of its species. Maya hoped that the little creature would remember their time together fondly, and that it would grow up to show the same kind of wisdom and compassion that Kong had demonstrated. The journey back to their tribal village took 3 full days as Maya and Kale traveled carefully through terrain that was less familiar to them than the valley where Kong had served as their guide. But the knowledge and confidence they had gained during their adventures served them well, and They were able to navigate the challenges of the wilderness with skills they had never possessed before. During their travels, Kale shared more details about his captivity and what he had learned about the reptilian civilization. His descriptions of their technology and social organization were fascinating and troubling in equal measure. The reptilian people clearly possessed capabilities that far exceeded those of any human tribe, but their treatment of other species suggested that they viewed themselves as superior to all other forms of life in the valley. Maya told Kale about her own discoveries during their rescue mission, including Kong's intelligence and the unexpected alliance with the baby dinosaur's family. She explained how Kong had protected numerous orphaned and injured creatures in his mountain cave, serving as a guardian for the defenseless rather than the terrifying monster their people believed him to be. Kale listened to these revelations with growing amazement, understanding that their adventure had taught them truths that would change their perspective on the world forever. As they drew closer to their village, both Maya and Kale began to consider how they would explain their experiences to their people. The truth was so extraordinary that many tribe members would probably dismiss it as fantasy or delusion. But Maya was determined to share what she had learned about Kong and the other creatures of the valley, believing that her people deserved to know the truth about the world beyond their limited territory. The village came into sight just as the sun was setting on their third day of travel. Its familiar collection of huts and fire circles looking both welcoming and strangely small after everything they had experienced in the valley. Maya felt a complex mixture of emotions as she saw her people going about their evening routines, preparing food, and tending to children who had no idea of the incredible adventure that had just taken place so close to their home. The tribe's reaction to their return was explosive. Kale had been given up for dead, and Maya's disappearance in search of him had been seen as a tragic but predictable consequence of her refusal to accept the inevitable. The joy of the reunion was overwhelming, with virtually every member of the tribe gathering to celebrate the safe return of two young people who had been lost to the dangerous wilderness. But as the initial excitement of their homecoming subsided, Maya began to share selected portions of their story with the tribal elders and other trusted members of their community. She was careful to present their experiences in ways that would be credible rather than simply amazing, focusing on the practical knowledge they had gained about survival in the wilderness and the discovery of new resources in previously unexplored areas. Maya did tell the truth about Kong, but she presented him as a protector rather than a threat, emphasizing his intelligence and compassion rather than simply his size and strength. Some of the elders were skeptical of her claims, but others recognized the wisdom in her words and the maturity that her experiences had brought to her character. The gift that Kong had made for Maya became a treasured artifact within the tribe, displayed in the central gathering place where everyone could see it and be reminded of the extraordinary friendship that had formed between their people and the legendary guardian of the valley. The intricate weaving and beautiful materials used in its construction were evidence of an intelligence and artistic ability that impressed even the most skilled craftspeople in the village. Over the following weeks, Maya found herself changed by her experiences in ways that went far beyond the simple acquisition of new knowledge and skills. She had developed a deeper understanding of the connections between all living things, a recognition that intelligence and consciousness could take forms that her people had never imagined. The courage she had shown during the rescue mission had proven to herself and others that she was capable of achieving things that seemed impossible when approached with determination and compassion. Kale, too, was transformed by their adventure. His captivity had been traumatic, but it had also taught him about resilience and the importance of hope even in the darkest circumstances. The knowledge he had gained about the reptilian civilization would prove valuable to their tribe in the years to come, helping them understand the broader world that existed beyond their familiar territory. As the seasons passed and their story became part of the tribal oral tradition, Maya often found herself looking toward the distant valley where Kong continued his role as protector of the innocent and guardian of the weak. She wondered how the baby dinosaur was growing and whether it still remembered the humans who had helped save its life. Sometimes, on particularly quiet nights, she thought she could hear faint roars in the distance, Kong's voice carrying across the miles to remind her that their friendship remained strong despite their physical separation. The relationship between Maya's tribe and the valley began to change as well. Where once they had viewed it as a place of terror and certain death, they now understood it as a complex ecosystem where intelligence and compassion existed alongside danger and wildness. Some of the younger tribe members, inspired by Maya's example, began to explore the edges of the valley, always with great care and respect for the creatures they might encounter. Maya herself became a leader among her people, not through force or political maneuvering, but through the respect she had earned by demonstrating extraordinary courage and wisdom. Her understanding of the natural world and her ability to see connections that others missed made her an invaluable advisor to the tribal council. But perhaps more importantly, her example inspired others to look beyond their traditional limitations and consider what might be possible if they approach challenges with an open mind and a brave heart. Years later, when Maya had become an elder herself and was teaching the tribe's children about the history and legends of their people, she would always include the story of Kong and the baby dinosaur. She told them about the importance of protecting those who could not protect themselves, about the wisdom of looking beyond surface appearances to understand the true nature of others, and about the incredible things that could be accomplished when different beings work together despite their differences. The children would listen to these stories with wide eyes and open minds, some of them beginning to dream of their own adventures in the mysterious valley. Maya would always encourage their curiosity while teaching them the importance of preparation, respect, and caution when venturing into unknown territory. She knew that each generation would face its own challenges and opportunities, and she wanted to ensure that they were equipped with both the practical knowledge and the moral understanding necessary to meet those challenges successfully. On special occasions, when the conditions were right and the valley was particularly quiet, Maya would take small groups of the most mature young people to the edge of Kong's territory. They would leave gifts of fruit and flowers in places where Kong might find them, tokens of continuing friendship and respect from the human tribe to their giant protector. Maya never saw Kong during these visits, but the gifts were always gone when they returned, and sometimes there were signs that something very large and intelligent had been investigating the area. The baby dinosaur that they had helped rescue grew to adulthood in the valley, becoming a leader among its own species, and passing on to its offspring the lessons of cooperation and mutual aid that it had learned during its time with Maya, Kale, and Kong. The alliance between the dinosaur family and Kong remained strong, creating a network of protection that made the valley a safer place for all of its inhabitants. As Maya grew older and her hair began to show streaks of silver, she often reflected on how a single act of courage had changed not only her own life, but the relationship between her people and the wider world. The decision to venture into the Forbidden Valley in search of her brother had led to discoveries that transformed her understanding of what was possible in a world full of wonder and danger. The valley itself continued to be a place of mystery and majesty, home to creatures that existed nowhere else, and secrets that had yet to be discovered. The reptilian civilization remained a concern, but their aggressive expansion had been curtailed by the resistance they encountered from Kong and his allies among the valley's native species. The balance of power in the ancient wilderness had shifted in favor of those who protected rather than exploited the natural world. Maya's story became a legend that was told and retold throughout the generations that followed, inspiring countless young people to look beyond their limitations and seek their own extraordinary adventures. Some of these stories were embellished over time, adding elements of magic and fantasy that Maya herself might not have recognized. But the core message remained unchanged, that courage, compassion, and an open mind could overcome seemingly impossible obstacles and create bonds of friendship that transcended all boundaries. In her final years, Maya would sometimes dream that she was back in the valley, riding on Kong's shoulder as they moved through the prehistoric jungle in search of new adventures. In these dreams, she was young again, filled with the excitement and wonder of discovering a world far larger and more complex than anything she had ever imagined. And when she woke from these dreams, she would smile with the knowledge that she had lived a life filled with extraordinary experiences and meaningful relationships that would continue to inspire others long after she was gone. The gift that Kong had made for her remained in the tribal gathering place, carefully preserved and protected by successive generations who understood its significance. Children would touch it gently and ask their elders to tell them once again about the brave girl who befriended a giant ape and saved a baby dinosaur, learning in the process that the most important adventures are often the ones that teach us about ourselves and our connections to the world around us. And somewhere in the distant valley, Kong continued his eternal watch over the creatures in his care, occasionally pausing in his duties to look toward the human settlement where his friend Maya had lived her remarkable life. In his ancient and wise heart, he carried the memory of their friendship and the knowledge that some bonds are strong enough to endure across any distance and through any amount of time. The legend of their alliance had become part of the valley's own story, a reminder that even in a world of predators and prey, kindness and courage could create something beautiful and lasting. The valley itself had been changed by their encounter, becoming a place where the impossible seemed possible and where the boundaries between different forms of life had been proven to be far more flexible than anyone had previously imagined. Future generations would build upon the foundation that Maya, Kong, Kale, and the baby dinosaur had created, discovering new possibilities for cooperation and understanding in a world that was far richer and more complex than their ancestors had ever dreamed. And so the legend lived on, a story of friendship and courage that would inspire and guide those who came after, reminding them that the greatest adventures often begin with a simple act of kindness, and that the most unlikely alliances can sometimes achieve the most extraordinary results. In a world full of wonders and dangers, the bonds forged between different species and different individuals remain the most powerful force for positive change, creating ripples that extended far beyond their original source and touching lives in ways that could never be fully measured or understood. The prehistoric valley continued to thrive under Kong's protection, a testament to the power of compassion and the importance of those who choose to use their strength to protect rather than to dominate. And Maya's legacy lived on in the hearts and minds of all those who heard her story, encouraging them to look beyond their fears and limitations to discover the incredible possibilities that awaited those brave enough to step into the unknown with an open heart and an adventurous spirit.